Hi, I'm Danger Dan Jers, the host and GM of the D&D Real Play podcast, D&D Dark. Join us on Wednesdays for an absurd, over-the-top comedy horror adventure, starring some of history's most infamous monsters.
I'm Ben Magnet. I play Mary Frankenstein, our barbarian.
I am Daniel Cruz. I am playing Imhotep the Mummy, our cleric.
I'm Jordan, and I play Larry Talbot, a lycanthropic warlock.
I am Grayson, playing Jack Griffin, the Invisible Man, the party's rogue.
I am Aaron. I play the Phantom of the Opera, our bard.
For more information, go to dndarkpodcast.com and listen to us anywhere you find podcasts.
Let's go. Master of all things tabletop. With the Paladins of Podcast. They ruin the games you love by talking rules that suck, how to build kick-ass encounters, destroy worlds, and really get your players invested. So go ahead and throw that fistful of dice at someone. Because we're going on a side quest.
Good afternoon, or evening. I always forget the time difference.
Hey, can't complain though. Every week, Paladins of Podcast are always back with another episode. So,
or good morning for the people who like listening to it in the morning on your Saturday drive to work. I hope you don't have to work on Saturday.
Dude, I hope not. I've had to do it a few times and it sucks. So, how are you doing, Eli?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm really excited because tomorrow I'm going to GaryCon. So I better sleep now because I probably won't be sleeping much for the next 4 or 5 days.
Now, for a little bit of context, this week we're recording on Tuesday. So you'll be leaving on Wednesday. Episode will release on Saturday. So for those of you who get it on Saturday, Eli's not just showing up on a Sunday.
4 days ago, or a week and 4 days. In the past.
In the past. Dude, does that mean we're technically from the future at this point?
No, we'd be from the past, speaking to the future.
Time travel. I just listened to the Time Traveler audiobook earlier this week by H.G. Wells.
The Time Traveler audiobook. I don't know if I've ever listened to that or read it.
I found it on Spotify. I love the book. I love the theory. I forgot that the book itself, though, is nothing but description. It's all an account of description. It's incredibly weird.
What do you mean by that?
So, the Time Traveler, the writing is in first-person perspective. I see this. I seen this. I noticed this. I felt this. And because it's after he had come back from his massive trip into the future, it's all a recollection or a recounting of what had happened to him. So, it's just a really
first person past tense.
Yeah.
Interesting. I like that.
It's not bad, but I forgot. As much as I enjoy the book, I like it more in memory than application.
Oh, no, like as in trying to use it in your RPG sessions, or having gone back and listened to it a second time?
Having listened to it or read it a second time, I prefer the memory over the actual reading or listening to it. So I also think it's an easier book to read than listen to.
Huh. I think that can be very true. I've listened to some audiobooks that are just awful, and then I pick up the book. It's wonderful, and vice versa.
Yeah, and that's fun.
It's tough to do the audiobook first and then see something written, because I listened to The Way of Kings all on audiobook.
Okay.
And then I ended up being on like the Way of Kings Reddit or sometime, and then I saw a name. It was like, what do you think this person will do? And I was like, who in tarnation is that person? It's like, what is this? And then I realized I've never actually seen any of these names or places written out. I've only heard them.
Right. That's really funny. I have the problem where if I listen to an audiobook and I go back to read it, I read it in the same inflection and voice that the narrator of the audiobook reads it. So, for example, I've just listened to Ready Player 2, which is narrated by Will Wheaton. And it's incredibly difficult not to go back and read it without hearing Will Wheaton's voice. But it's fun. So, yeah. Otherwise, I'd like to excuse my semi lack of energy. I literally got out of surgery earlier today from recording for the fix for my hand, and it feels like it's just dead weight and numb. I'm not super groggy, just lacking a little bit of regular energy.
Rob's a mad lad.
Yeah, buddy. So, Eli, we did a little bit of talking beforehand, and we decided that because you had not had a session but did some prepping for the convention, we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but kind of go about a little bit what happened in my most recent session, and then move on with an actual plan for today's episode.
Yeah, let's hear it. How'd your session go?
So my session went pretty darn well. One of my players couldn't make it, which is irritating. Not because he couldn't make it, correction, not why he couldn't make it. I always say that our tabletop gaming experience is a extracurricular activity. Obviously, life comes first. Put family before this is acceptable. But damn it, when you're planning stuff out to utilize everybody in the party and they don't make it, it's slightly irritating. Anyhow, we successfully...
Let's touch on that for a second.
Yeah.
What is your normal attendance? Like, you do have pretty large groups, right?
Yeah.
And was this a no call, no show, or was this like a...
Nope, he let me know. He let me know the day before. So he was within a 24-hour time frame, which is the bare minimum that's acceptable for us. We all agreed upon that on our session 0. This particular group tends to miss one player every other week, and it usually is this one player. So he's got an every other week thing going on. But he's also went through a lot of changes, so now that those things are normaled out, and this last game was kind of it was a family event that was scheduled, that I'm not complaining about it. I think it's totally fine. I do have a concern because he has had a history of doing things similar with no excuse before. So I'm a little leery. We're going to see how it goes, and there'll be a conversation if it doesn't seem to get any better with nothing going on in his life.
If I may ask, what were you planning that required this player to be there? Especially for a player it sounds like they're missing half the time already.
Yeah, so this is the player that actually initiated my kind of descent into the idea of bringing in the Cthulhu mythos. So this character has a huge marking on his face that is the sign of Cthulhu himself. They don't know what it is. They're investigating it, etc. Excuse me. They ended up in the ruins of the Ashland Mountains, and they came across, well, not just the ruins, but a set of ruins in the Ashland Mountains, where they found a idol, a full-sized, medium-sized statue of Cthulhu himself. And he wasn't there to have any effect by it. Nobody else really knew what it was.
A full-sized medium statue?
Yeah.
Isn't Cthulhu, enormous?
Medium-sized creature, full-size statue.
A medium-sized statue, true to scale.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, really hard to describe that. It's life-size. No, not so. See, life-size was the wrong word. It's a medium-sized statue of Cthulhu. That would have had some effect on his mentality because it would have reflected things that he's had in visions. Also opened up a little bit more for the lore on that aspect to build out.
So the party encountered this statue, and you were planning on having this specific player have like these same flashbacks that tied back to previous dreams or past notes.
Yeah.
So what did you do instead, or did you scrap that scene?
Nope, the scene still went off without a hitch. However, whether or not the player was there, this is the really unusual part. I was going to have the outcome of what happened with the statue the same. So what happened was they ended up with, you're familiar with Hellraiser?
Yeah.
Okay, so the party got essentially the Lamant's configuration box, and it acts like a key. And the key opens up a portal to the Schism. And they've met a character from the Schism already who was a black market guy. That's kind of where he lives. And the party split. One of them opened up the portal, brought the black market guy forward, and it was in the room directly next to an archway to see the visible statue of Cthulhu. He walked in, looked around, and like, yes, we've seen each other before. Slight conversation. Oh, shit, does anybody own that statue? And they're like, no. And so he's like, perfect. And he just takes it. So he touches it, it shrinks, he puts it in his coat pocket. He's like, cool, is there anything else here that I can buy? And they told him about a harp that they found earlier. And this is where we get into statues. So let's talk about the Cthulhu aspect first. He was going to essentially take the statue either way. Had they said yes that they owned it, he would have paid them for it. But they don't own it, it's up for free. So he just took it.
Was there any lamenting at the table when he then said, anything else I could buy? And then they went, we could have sold that. Or
there was the, damn it, we should have said yes. And then when he said, yeah, is there anything else I can buy? They're like, oh, we do have something. And one of them was like, no, you don't. Slightly before that had happened, they came across a harp made out of bone and sinew. So it was beautifully demonically carved bone, and the strings were made out of tendon and sinew.
I mean, that's the best instrument. Get out of here with cedar and oak. Give me some bone and sinew.
Yes. Well, our bard, who actually happens to be specialized in perform and strings, played it, and she played wonderfully. But it was a cursed item. So everybody but the barbarian, by the way, failed their will save. And, well, 3 players failed their will save. Barbarian, the bard, and somebody else. But only the bard failed the will save to not go into a frenzious rage.
So this all happened, but we're getting a little bit off tangent of the difference from this encounter with and without this player.
Yeah. So literally, the things that we were missing were just to help fill in his unknown issues with the curse thing on his face and his changes to his magic.
Did you have prepped sheets to hand out to that player if they arrived when they ran into this statue?
No, not this time. I would use
what tact? Let's say that player's there, they run into the statue. How were you going to reincorporate the? How are you going to reconnect the statue with whatever had happened to them in the past?
They would have had mental visions that would have pieced together more issues. They would have had things that they've heard within their head, kind of piece together a little bit more information. And then after that, they would have gotten a handout before next session about the entire depth of it all. So they would have had the bedrock.
My question, I guess, is if you were going to do it in the open in the first place, why didn't you do it again? Why didn't you do that same spiel without that player being there?
Nobody else got the effects. They're not familiar enough with just an idol statue. But the image of Cthulhu himself is actually burned into the player's head. So when he sees it, he actually gets kind of like a triggered insanity. So for 1d4 minutes, he suffers the effects of a confusion spell.
Is he aware of that situation, or is the other
Yes.
players?
The player is aware of the situation. The other players haven't. Well, correction. The players understand what's going on. The characters are unsure of what is the cause and effect.
Because in my opinion at least, I feel like I would have ran it as intended, even without that player, just so that I could try to tie the other players back, what the other players are having, so that when, into that specific player's background. That way, when the player comes back, right, they can, discuss it and be like, we saw this crazy stuff about Cthulhu. Oh! Yeah, we can't see that statue anymore. It's gone. And then that player's drat.
I made the conscious decision not to tie them into each other. Back when we first introduced the idea of Cthulhu to the character himself. And the reason that we did that is because this character has a little bit more of a limited backstory he's letting me kind of handle a lot of it. So his knife block includes one really big knife, and I wanted the complications to come from more in-game things because I've got a huge setup and possibility for this character later in the game. He's also a part of the game that has the super huge lore monkey. So he's the one who's always looking for lore. Providing too much lore to the one character who has a bad habit of not reiterating it left a huge chance for my player not getting it. So it's easier to let the statue go, and we'll take the effect that was supposed to affect him and place it somewhere else.
So all the other players wouldn't really have gotten meaningful value out of this.
Correct.
This encounter, because they're not really into that sort of stuff. Awesome.
Right. So divvied that up properly. The other big thing that happened was the harp that I had mentioned earlier. That was tied directly to a character's background story in a different way. So the harp is, again, a cursed item, caused an actual PC fight. Nobody had their death flags up. They were all attacked by the barbarian because he saved his will save not to fall into a horrendous frenzied rage and attack the closest people nearby. They all survived. No death flags, so nobody even dropped a 0. They subdued him, tied him up. The guy from the schism that we met offered to pay off essentially the entire debt to the background character. Not the background character. The PC character's background story, which is 20,000 gold pieces and incurs interest every day. So instead of working with 20,000 gold pieces, he provided them with a 400-pound lump of gold. That was also minimized when he pulled it out and grew to true size when he let it go. As they hacked it apart, as they broke it into smaller manageable chunks, they got to a core, and I used third-party spell. My party has allowed me as a DM to use third-party resources, whereas they're restricted to first-party. So that way they're encountering things that they're not always 100% familiar with, and even when they roll things, they might not have it click immediately. But what it was a trap, and I did not expect this. The trap was not meant for them. It was a curse as a prison meant for the guy who was trapped inside, which when they got to the middle of the molten core gold...
What do you mean that you didn't expect that the inside of this...
You gotta listen to it. I know, you gotta listen to the entire thing here. You're gonna ask questions and the story is gonna be told out of order. They got to the molten core. All right? Inside the molten core, which is more like a bubble sack, there was a trapped soul. I did not expect them to pop the trapped soul open. I expected them to try to say, okay, we gotten to the point where we should wrap it in something, which would have hardened into gold, and then it would have grown from there again, kind of like a perpetual source of finances, which is what my players tend to do. If, for instance, they were given the hand of Midas, they would wrap it in something, and they would carry it with them. So that's what I expected them to do. They didn't. They popped it, and they released the guy on the inside.
So they were given a huge chunk of gold.
Yeah.
Whose inside was a molten core of gold.
Yep.
That was a prison of a person.
Yep. Yep.
So they cracked it open.
Yep.
And how did they pop open the inside? Like, was that just like...
So
what was your plan for them to not get in there, I guess?
Like I said, I expected them, once they realized that physical objects that touched it hardened into gold.
I didn't realize that. So the prison in the core, if it touches something, it turns it into gold?
Yeah, so if you were to wrap it around a blanket, you no longer have access to the molten core, but that blanket wrapped around it is hardened into gold, like a shell.
Oh, okay.
Now, they first thought it was a dragon egg, and they were super excited. It was not a dragon egg, Eli. I told you a little bit about...
What's in the prison?
I told you a little bit about the history of Animar, right?
Yes, you have.
All right. I told you that the legendary dragon Rake used to be a wizard.
Yes. That's the dragon that's sleeping under the mountain that was woken up by scrying someone's dream.
Yep.
Okay.
And did I tell you that his dragon form isn't partially due to the fact that he made a deal with a demon?
Nope. It must have slipped your mind.
It is the demon who granted him the ability to be as powerful of a dragon as he is.
So inside this prison, they have a demon who basically created a god dragon, and they freed it.
Yep.
Okay.
Now,
is this where the session ended, or did you keep
it ended?
Okay.
Moments later, mere moments. Now this demon, lawful evil NPC, no qualms with the party whatsoever. They did not try to attack him. They didn't try to do anything. But they're like, shit, we just unreleased a demonic godling of power into Animar. And he literally was like, no, I have business in hell. And what they don't realize is characters, but I told them as players, nah, you guys fucked over hell. And the Dragon Rake has a big problem on his hands now because he was the actually the one who imprisoned him. Kind of like a double cross.
Okay. So
now
they let him go.
Yeah.
What did you do? The moment that took you by surprise, what happened?
The moment they took me by surprise is when they popped him.
Yep.
So they freed him. Now this is where tonight's really big question comes into play. How much prep do you put into a session?
Well, first let me know what you did.
All right. When they popped the prison, I didn't plan on them popping the prison. I had no plan as if they were going to pop the prison. My only plan was for them to do what I expected them to do because that's what they have always done in every game before forever. So I expected them to follow course. The second they popped the prison, I was off script.
Okay.
So freeing the guy, figuring out who he was, having a generated image for him already. So what I ended up doing was taking bits and pieces of fragmented ideas and coalescing them into the conclusion of them popping the egg. So I had fragments, not an idea, prepared.
Okay.
And I coalesced it all into a coherent idea on the fly.
Okay. So what did you do?
Well, they freed him. He went back to hell. They were introduced to him. That's about it.
So they had like a short little scene. You described this demon creature. Demon was like, thanks, I'm off to hell.
Yep. Oh, and all of the gold that had originated from the prison itself, once he was free, turned back to blood and crawled back into his body. So they have 0 gold, nothing to show for selling the expensive harp.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
So how was the party? How was the party mood? Did they feel like they got cheated by the person in the black market? Like, are they annoyed at themselves? Are they annoyed at you?
Believe it or not, their biggest feeling was, shit, we just fucked somebody over. And that was it. Like, they're like, I can't believe we released a huge, powerful bad guy, an evil guy. Like, we really keep screwing up, guys. We keep unleashing god levels of hell upon the earth. And they're like, but surprisingly, nothing horrible has happened yet. I have to keep reminding them that what's going on is the world's oldest and biggest cat and mouse game ever. So their concern was not about how they have to make money. They're not concerned about introducing the world to evil powers. It's literally no, that's what the concern is releasing the world evil powers into the world. And we're like, shit, we screwed that one up. They keep failing forward. It's awesome.
So I guess how many, like, you've got this trapped heart, you've given the player this piece of gold, which was kind of like double booby trapped. How often are you giving your players like cursed or essentially trap items?
These are this is the first time.
Okay. All right.
So they don't generally encounter them frequently, primarily because I have bad memories of the Necklace of Strangulation.
Yeah, cursed items can be fun, and cursed items can be not fun. Really,
Right.
Really depends on how bad they are.
Agreed. And I've learned a long time ago that when you throw in a cursed item, sometimes it's really hard because you have the player who's going to identify the item, but it tracks as not cursed, but just magical. And they can keep trying to probe and push to figure out if it's cursed or not. And that kind of ruins a lot of the fun and mysticism behind the idea of a cursed item. And realistically, when you're not dealing with really bad guys or cults, I don't think cursed items would really pop up too often. So I don't throw them in very often unless those sort of elements are around.
I appreciate tiered systems for identifying magic items, like where if there's a DC, one DC to identify elements and then another DC to identify cursed.
Yeah.
The way Hackmaster does identification is like every day you can make a check to identify something about the item you have. If you succeed, you learn one piece of information about that magic item. And you don't know if you're done until eventually you reach a success and you're like, there's nothing more to learn. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of end up in those situations where you've identified two really cool abilities of an item. You're like, is there a downside? Is there more good things? Is there bad things? Do I use this yet? And so there's a little bit of that risk of danger.
I like that. Very similar. I will do if they beat the DC by incremental amounts. So let's say the DC is 5, for example, and they roll a 20. If the highest DC is 20, they will learn that 20 and everything down. But if they get a 15, they'll learn everything 15 and down.
Yeah.
So I think that's also one of those things where I'll start introducing the idea of pushing the roll. Like, you can choose to push if you want to, but you might activate the weapon or a magical backlash kind of thing. So that's a decent idea. I
kind of want to touch in on that push the roll thing, but first I kind of want to circle back to your gold. The giant thing of gold that you gave them was essentially a cursed item, right? So
more like a magical trap, a magical prison.
Right, but it when they opened it, they ended up losing. Like, the whole thing about a cursed item is you find something that you think is really awesome, you use it, and you're like, it's actually worthless. It's worth nothing. And with yours, right, they found it's a prison, they opened the prison, mm-hmm. and now it's essentially worthless.
Yep.
For me, when I try to use a lot of cursed items, I only try to introduce them when there's some way in the game, either the party has the resources themselves, or they know someone who they can try to get to undo the effects. With this cursed item, there's not really any sort of benefit. Like, they released this demon prince, and they kind of just got a face full of suck.
Right. So this one turns out to be more of a story element at this point. But B, again, I had never expected them to open the prison. They had no way to really know that it was a prison. And particularly, had they just wrapped it in a blanket, it would have begun to perpetually build back gold. So everything was in their benefit. I gave out all the responses to where, as if they were to find a way to encase it again, that is what would have happened. I gave them all of their clues. Like, somebody threw organic objects on it. It just kind of sucked those in. But inorganic objects, well, let me rephrase that, because technically wool would be an organic object. They fried up some dead rats that they found from a monster that they killed earlier. Sucked those in. They were like, oh, it has to deal with blood, because I figured out the blood to gold thing. That was the initial spell, blood to gold. So you give it blood, it'll be good. That's where they got that it was a living creature. That's where they jumped on their own goddamn choo-choo train of it's a dragon egg, and it was not. So they were trying to kind of feed it to hatch it. But somebody threw on something like I don't remember if it was rock pieces or rope pieces, but it stuck and turned to gold.
Interesting.
So, I mean, like, they know that they put up something like that on it, it'll turn to solid gold, but they were still on the it's a dragon. It's a baby dragon, and I want the baby dragon.
So did you prepare or plan for a way for them to open it, or did they come up with an idea that you're like, yeah, that would work, let's open it?
They essentially came up with the idea, and I'm like, yep, that'll work. They have a god-blessed magic weapon, and this is essentially a super powerful mortal curse that turned into a trap for a not quite full-fledged deity. So, like, god-tiered weapon, pops it right open. It's only a membrane bubble.
Okay.
Normal
So,
weapons, however, are melted.
Did you think, like, for me, I think if I was in that situation, at least depending on the time, like if we're near or kind of at least halfway through a session, I would probably have described the demon coming out and would have tried to end on a cliffhanger right there, like before the demon said anything. That way the party might not know, is this combat? Is this an interaction? Are we dead? Are we screwed?
So, it was close towards the end of the night. The lore monkey, his name is Ezreal, just totally opened up and said, "Hey, I'm Ezreal. Who are you?" And the demon gives no name to anybody, but as he repeated his name, Ezreal, cast Dominate Person.
So,
And
I mean, that's all fine that happened, but
that's how it initiated the scene.
so, I mean, it sounds like you kind of got pushed around as a GM into going into unfamiliar turf.
No, I was familiar with it. I had developed an idea on how Rake became a dragon anyway, and I knew that he double crossed somebody, so it just gave me an opportunity to to combine multiple ideas and flesh it into one.
All right, but, like, couldn't you have described the Demon Prince and then said, and that's where we're going to end the session? And then even if this Ezreal player said, "Oh, hi, I'm Ezreal," like, you could have, like, did you not feel like that was an option, or were the players just immediately like, "Yeah, let's do this," and then you were kind of like riding that enthusiasm into keeping the scene going longer?
A little bit of both. They were super excited. I was super excited. We were close to the end of the night, but we had a good, like, 25 minutes left, and I really wanted to end at the next point.
Okay.
So, they were in the very last room of a dungeon when this happened. So, they ended up making it into the next floor of the dungeon, and that's where we ended.
So I guess my question for you is, why did the party have to reach that next floor before you could stop the session? Like, is it based on your prep? Like,
No, it breaks it up easy. So it's like, imagine a TV show. If there's 5, I'll use 8 rooms for this. Imagine a TV show, and there's 8 rooms that they have to get through, and in 30 minutes they only make it through 3 of them, and the episode ends. That means they either got to push for 4 on the next episode, 3, and have a third episode for the last one. I don't like doing that.
Interesting.
I like to end things on logical even blocks.
So in that case where if you have a situation, there's a 7-room dungeon and the party only seems like they're going to be able to get through 3 in a session, but you want to get through the rest of the 7, what do you do in that situation?
Depending on what's going on in the dungeon. So if it's a heavily active dungeon, we just end at the 3, and next game we get through as many as we can. But if it's a light dungeon where it's not heavy with activities, we just kind of push through. They don't like to hear all the intricate details of nothing. So.
Okay, yeah. I mean, just for me in my games, I I don't ever try to like push the party too hard, like at least in terms of like their pacing, because if they're unless it seems like the game is dragging on or nothing is actually happening, but I try to just let the session end wherever the party is after we usually play about 4 hours. That's usually where we end.
Yeah, and we play for about 4 hours as well. The big thing here is that freeing out the demon prince, it wasn't going to be a physical encounter. It wasn't even really going to be an encounter. It was more of a story element. The room that they were in had already been cleared, and all that was left for them was literally to go through that room and down a flight of stairs before they were in the next level of the dungeon.
Now, you say it wasn't a combat encounter, but the first thing that your party did was try to fight it, or at least cast Dominate Person.
He cast Dominate Person on Ezreal.
I completely misinterpreted that.
Yeah.
Did it work?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The Demon Prince is way more powerful.
And how, I mean, doesn't Dominate Person give you control over the player, or it gives you... Right?
It's like a suggestion they must follow, so long as it doesn't go against their natural personality. So, for example, if you would never in a million years, because it's part of your core being, kick a puppy, Dominate Person would be successful, but if you were told to kick a puppy, you really wouldn't kick a puppy.
So what did this Demon Lord tell Ezreal to do before poofing away?
Lead him out of the dungeon.
Oh, lead the Demon Prince?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that so the Demon Prince is being led by the party out of the dungeon.
Yeah.
I thought the Demon Prince teleported away.
Once he was out.
Oh, so the party opened up the prison, Demon Prince came out, dominated one person, lead me out. That person let him out, and then they teleported away?
Yep.
Okay.
Offering zero in the way of conversation, except for he asked what era it was.
All right. So. I might not fully agree with that, how that all played out, but that's all right. You said your players asked at the very end how much you prep for?
Yes.
So how did that come up?
Everything that I had presented them, while all on the fly, was incredibly coherent. It all made sense in game. It all made sense to the players. It all matched up with what they wanted to do, what they wanted to see, and the directions in which they wanted to go. So I hit all these huge milestones for the players' enjoyment and what they were looking for.
And so they asked you, wow, how much do you prep for?
Yes. They're like, how do you do it? How do you make it seem like it's all right there? Like, how much do you prep? And my only answer is I prep just enough and just loosely enough where I can coherently paste it together if necessary.
Yeah, that seems like a good way to describe it. As long as you're coherent, that's a good amount of prep. Do you feel like you did enough prep for this session?
Yeah. Like they're going through a 3-floor dungeon, so I got all of the floors designed, all of the encounters managed, handled, present, and all of the random possibilities built out. The only things that I don't have truthfully prepped at the moment right now, because I will do that closer to when their game comes back up, is any random weird story elements that just keep things tied to backstories or the current going-ons.
So for your prep time in, like, I don't know how much prep time you use, but in your prep time before a session, you will reread your descriptions rooms and maybe make some additions and add story elements that can tie into the players?
Yep, I'll make story elements, I'll generate imagery, and then I'll always generate a little bit more if I have an idea that will work later on. But if I need to throw it in now, I have it there in case it has to be thrown in.
So this Demon Prince you had was pretty much unprepared for them to open up that prison. So there are some elements inside that dungeon you're not quite prepared for, right?
Yeah, I can't prepare for absolutely every contingency, but I was able to prepare enough where I can shoehorn things in so they make sense. So improvisation. I guess that's truthfully where one of my strengths lies, because I can prep just enough where I can improvise what I've prepped against future preparations, and then build from there.
I find a lot of my prep time also gets into producing like player-facing elements. So like I can have a lot of stuff built on my side, but having maps prepared for like a virtual tabletop or players' handouts or sheets, maps, that ends up being a decent chunk of my prep time. Making NPCs, just because I have also built out the module, built out the dungeon that they're going through, and so a lot of it is kind of filling back what the player actually sees.
Right. And since my arm issue has happened, I found that getting my printouts done on time is actually it's actually harder for me because I can't type. So I find that since Potato had passed away, since I had my blow up with the red flag player in my hand, my creative juices have been at a near low point, and it's driving me nuts. I can get fragments, bits and pieces, but building out something coherent seems to take everything out of me. It's weird.
Like building, like what do you mean by that? Like building out a room, or even just preparing the next area, like the next floor that the party's going to?
I'll use an NPC, for example. I can say I like the horribly scarred and disfigured cloaked assassin from the jungles of the Eastern Hemisphere. But immediately, if I try to push that any farther, I got nothing. I can't tell you why he's there. I can't generate why he's there, where he came from, what sort of habitation of jungle, anything. Like, it literally stops at the base surface level idea. And the harder I try to push deeper in, it feels more like a mental strain, and like I'm just pushing against a resistant block that I can't get through.
I think maybe the first thing would be, you don't always have to push that deep or that far. Like there is an element of just, if you're being creative in one direction, just keep following those. Like if you can spit out 100 descriptions of an NPC like that, boom, follow your creativity, follow what you do have, and then it'll blossom and grow into more creativity.
I've tried. It's not. It's literally stopping everywhere.
You've been listening to audiobooks. You've
Yes.
been reading.
Yes.
I guess consuming entertainment media.
Yep. Trying to get it back. And the only thing that has been making me feel remotely okay and creative is actually map making.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Map making. And are you mainly doing that digitally or by hand?
Digital. I have a pen input tablet, so I can hand draw map elements, but I utilized mapeffects.com, a lot of their map packs for Photoshop brushes, and then I will generate the area and place the buildings, and it's been the coloring and everything that has actually been making me feel good. Like cool. I can get absorbed in that.
Well, I'll suggest 3 different things. The first 2 I don't think are very feasible and might be difficult. The third one's pretty easy. The first 2 would be playing some games yourself, and then just see it from the other side. You see another GM playing. It always inspires me, at least, to see other GMs playing or to play in a game, just to to see what they're doing well, what they might not be doing well, and how I can improve my own game. The second thing would be to play a different game system in a completely different. Like right now, you're playing high fantasy. Mm-hmm. Play a completely different genre. Don't play fantasy. play low sci-fi or just something completely different where the ideas are going to be of a completely different nature, so you can get those things firing. But the third thing I was going to say is, if you really like doing maps and you are continuing on as normal, I'd say paint some miniatures. Paint some minis for your game.
We're so close to the end of the episode. I wanted to talk about that today, so we got to push it off. I will. I don't want to end this episode on a really heavy note, so I'm going to tell you something kind of personal after we end the recording.
Of course.
But painting miniatures is something I really want to talk about, and it's something that we've covered for a brief minute, I think, in season 2 when Josh was with us for a few episodes. Like, I got a few techniques and styles I like. I'm having a hard starting point. So when we start next week's episode, let's try to hit that painting miniatures hard, because I have to buy paint and I don't know where to start yet. I have some that I love, but justifiably priced to value to amount, so many factors, and there are so many people getting into miniature printing right now, and painting is going to boom with it, that they have to be able to start somewhere, and Googling the best paints is not the best way to do this.
Yeah,
I've tried.
It can be a tough thing to get into, especially with all the different jargon. But yeah, I'd love to talk about it, and we'll talk about controversies. Painting miniatures is a huge thing in the BattleTech community right now, and it's
really
blowing up.
There are controversies about it?
There are controversies, yeah.
Oh, geez, oh, Pete. I can't wait till next week's episode.
All right.
So,
I can't either. We'll talk about paint.
Any words of advice?
Go to conventions. Play games. Don't hurt your arm.
Thank you. I love how I ask if you have any words of advice, like, every week, and it's still like a pause. But, like, do I have one of these prepared?
Wisdom as deep and valuable as mine, it doesn't just come up in the few moments after you ask me.
That's fair. But I agree. Don't hurt your arm. Stay safe and productive, guys. We'll see you next week. Check us out at epictablegames.com or on Facebook.
Cowabunga.
Okay, new intro. We've changed the name, and we're still using the word paladin. Paladin. I mean, it hasn't been used in the English language in about 200 years, but okay.